So today we're exposing Subversion for all it is. So basically we're talking about version control, and my choice topic is Subversion, and you'll see why later on. So what is version control? What problems do we encounter whenever we want to develop software? Amongst many developers, we know that you have to share files amongst many people. So the problem comes here. It's this is in fact from the SVN book that you can find on the Tigris website. So Harry and Sally want to read a file. They both get the most current version of the file, and they both start modifying it. Harry then writes back to the repository his file, and then to Sally, and all of Harry's changes are not there. So there are several tools and philosophies for how you do file synchronization. So one method is the lock, modify, unlock. This is the default for Visual Source Safe. So basically the way that works is you say to the repository, I want to edit this file, and it gives you a copy of the file and locks it so nobody else can edit it or do anything with it, retrieve it or whatnot. So nobody else can do it. When you're done, you unlock it, and then the next person can retrieve it and get your changes. So there are a couple drawbacks to this. One, it kind of inhibits the parallel development on the same or related files. So even if you have files with dependencies, it kind of inhibits the development because of the false sense of security you get. If they're locked, I can't screw anything up, so I'm safe. But that kind of falls by the wayside if you have two files that have dependencies, and one person's working on one file and another person's working on the other file. Well, you know, they're not locked, so they should be able to work. You end up making changes. Once you commit them all in, nothing works anymore because of this kind of false sense of security. It's also a little administrative headache sometimes. And so is Subversion. So I'm not just bashing Source Safe or anything, but it also creates a kind of administrative headache on, you know, who has the lock, where's the lock at, can we find the person with the lock. We've had several instances where we're running around yelling at each other, trying to find out who has a lock on a file. So I do not like this method. There are cases where you do want to do a lock, modify, and lock. One really good benefit of using this method is for binary files or also generated files because there's no merging of sections. You can't do section changes within a binary file very easily. The next methodology, as you'll guess, is going to be the way Subversion by default does it, is called the copy, modify, merge. So Harry and Sally both check out the file that they want to modify. They both start making their changes, A and A prime. Sally gets done first, so she commits her code to the repository. And then whenever Harry wants to, he actually gets what's called a file conflict, since the version he was working off of is less than the current version of the file that's on the repository. So now the repository now knows that there has been a modification, and he's trying to commit a version of the file that's now outdated. And so that's when you get a conflict, and you'll have to do the merge itself. So once he gets the conflict on the bottom right-hand side, then what happens is he rechecks out the file. And so he has A double prime plus his A prime that he changed. He manually has to merge the changes, and then he commits actually what's now A triple prime to the repository. So that's how the copy, modify, merge works on a by picture basis. So drawbacks. Can't really use with binary files, which I've already said. It is also very frustrating if you're not familiar with the concepts behind the copy, modify, merge, or even the tools that you're using to do it. And I've been frustrated before, but I've also seen other people really frustrated because it's like voodoo sometimes. So that's what this Lunch and Learn is about, is to teach you about how to use Subversion, because that's the tool we use. So the general structure of your repository in Subversion is you have three main directories within a given project in your repository: trunk, tags, and branches. In the trunk, you should have your edge release at all times. It should be compiling, it should be working, and it should be the most recent of your code that has been integrated in testing and works. And it's a good idea never to work in your trunk. Tags are something that is really convenient to do. You can create milestones or releases or snapshots of the project at a certain given point in time. So say you are building by milestones. When you get to milestone 1 and you've integrated everything back into the trunk and the trunk works, and you want to be able to go back to that one milestone, then you can create a tag, which is just like creating a branch, except it's an unmodified version of a copy of the code in the trunk. And so you can create that tag and you can go back to it any time. You create it once and you never modify it. It should not be, you should not work on a tag. So, and finally we have the branches. Branches are basically where we do all of our work at. There are several ways you can organize how you branch and how you merge and whatnot. Kind of a method that I'm going to be going through with y'all today is something that we've been using and enhancing and changing how we kind of organize our branches from, I guess it started with, I guess it really started with Contech and then went on to DFWHC is where Fareem really stepped up and started making the way, and then we carried it on to Universe. So this is kind of the way we did it is each disjoint component in your architecture is its own branch. And I'll show you kind of how that progresses throughout your project, starting with architectural design, how it looks within your project plan, where you create branches, where you stop and do integration and everything. And it also somewhat forces code reviews and integration testing. There are automated tools. I know that you're all looking at cruise control. I didn't have the documents. The documents weren't ready for me to see how cruise control works. So that will be a future lunch and learn that Fareem can give you next week or after. But basically, there are tools that you can also use that will work with your repository. But whenever you get to an integration point where you have to start doing merges back into the trunk or into an integration branch, it kind of forces you to do the integration testing. Well, you could still integrate and not retest your code, but it kind of facilitates that pretty cleanly. So here's our example. We got the Easy Breezy Employee Manager 1.0, or the EBEM 1.0. This is a brief architecture. It's kind of hard to read, but I didn't put a lot of time or thought into it. But there's an email notification layer that has some components in it. The employee management layer, which is really a web application with 2 other subsystems in it that actually do all the business logic and will touch the data. And you have a reporting layer and of course the database. So this is just a simple, don't knock my architecture. I just kind of came up with it within 10 minutes. But this is our example. We're going to be showing you how we're going to do the development with an employee management layer using our repository within the context of our project plan.